Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And I want to welcome you to my August 2025 horoscope forecast. On August 2nd, Venus in Cancer will form a square to Saturn and Neptune in the astrological sign of Aries. This is what I call the can't do anything right square. And that's because the energies are so entangled and the messages are so mixed and everything is being interpreted in the absolute wrong way. Now, the reason for this is because we really have two squares that are going on at the same time. We have Venus in Cancer forming a square to Saturn, and we have Venus in Cancer forming a square to Neptune. Now, Neptune and Saturn happen to be conjunct one another in the sky. They're both conjunct in the zodiac sign of Aries. A conjunction is when two planets are at the same place at the same time in the sky. So a conjunction is essentially a composite of the two planetary energies. Now, that doesn't mean that the planetary energies are mixing or blending together. What it means is that they're a composite. They're very much their own selves, but at the same time, they're very much joined to one another. Perhaps the best way to think of a conjunction is as a three-legged race. Two planets are tied to one another and they have to race forward and cross the finish line together. And so when you have planets like Saturn and Neptune conjunct in a zodiac sign like Aries, you have a lot of discomfort that's going on. Neptune is the planet of vision. It's the planet that will mythologize whatever zodiac sign it happens to be passing through. And Neptune right now, as I said, is in the zodiac sign of Aries. So Neptune is going to mythologize all of those Aries attributes, like being tough and at the ready, heroic, and powering through whatever kind of obstacle. Neptune will also mythologize aspects of Aries that have to do with sort of breaking the rules or the laws if you have to in order to get something done. It's not quite an exceptionalism. Aries never sees themselves as being above the law, but Aries is driven by a kind of urgency. And so if it has to break a rule or have to break a law in order to get something done, it will. Now, Saturn in the zodiac sign of Aries, Saturn is in its fall in the zodiac sign of Aries. That means this is a very challenging place for Saturn to be. And the reason why it's such a challenging place for Saturn to be is that Saturn is a winter sign, not a spring sign. So Saturn in Aries has a tendency to be very slow to start, to be very leaden instead of urgent and quick, and to be very self-conscious, sort of standing outside those natural impulses that Aries wants to exhibit. Aries wants to go ahead and get something done. But Saturn in Aries puts the brakes on that sort of energy. And it's full of uncertainty and anxiety. It's not sure if this is the right action. Aries by itself is, take right action. This is what I came up with in the moment. Might work, it might not, but let's give it a try. So that's an Aries type of energy. But Saturn has a tendency to ride the brake in moments like that. What Saturn also has is a tremendous amount of self-doubt. All right, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's out there in front. It's out there in the lead. It's taking charge and command of a situation. And Saturn is always full of questions. It's full of doubts. It's full of anxiety. Is this the right action? Are you the right person to be taking charge and command like this? Is this really the right decision? Is it being driven by urgency, or have you given it proper thought? So again, Saturn rides the brakes here. But Saturn will also introduce doubt into something that Aries wants to express itself with. Aries wants to express confidence. Aries wants to express a bravery. Aries wants to express a kind of hyper-masculinity, especially when it's being informed by the energies of Neptune. What Saturn does here is say, well, maybe you're not that sure of yourself. Maybe this isn't really the right way to go. Maybe you're not as strong or brave as you think. Maybe you're not as masculine or assertive as you think. So when those two energies come together, there can be a lot of discomfort around the idea of being in an authority position or taking the lead. Some people might be like, well, I'm not up to this, and so I'm going to sort of shrink away and not take this on. But a lot more people are going to say, I'm up to it. I know I can do it. I'm going to power right on through. And they're going to try to outrace those doubts and anxieties. They're going to try to outshout those anxieties and fears by sort of pumping themselves up, getting their chest to, be like this and roaring at anyone who's going to challenge them in any sort of way. So what you have here, again, is a sort of hyper Aries-ness that's going on. And it might be going on because it's trying to compensate, perhaps even overcompensate for all of those feelings that aren't on the same page with the Aries energy, for all of those questions, for all of those doubts that are being nursed underneath. And so this might produce a sort of strike first and ask questions later type of energy. Now, what happens when this forms a square to Venus in the zodiac sign of Cancer? Venus is a planet that I associate with the laws of attraction. Venus doesn't talk so much about the things that you like as much as it will talk about the people who like you. Okay, so Venus, I want you, when you think of Venus, I want you to think of like a perfume, a scent. Okay, Venus exudes this perfume. Venus exudes this scent to people who, when they smell it, are immediately like, what are you wearing? Or I want to be near this energy, or I just can't get enough of you, sort of thing. Venus, when she's in an astrological sign like Cancer, exudes a kind of familiarity, maybe even a kind of folksiness or comfort. People immediately are like, I feel so relaxed around you. I feel so comfortable with you. Venus in Cancer is actually famous for whenever she meets children or animals, children and animals want to go home with her. They want her to be their mother. They want her to be their parent. That's kind of the effect that Venus in Cancer can have. It's a wonderful energy for when you're dating someone or getting to know someone. I mean, the person is pretty much put at ease and feels very comfortable with you. But let's say you are introduced to someone that you're going out with. Let's say you're going out with someone and you're introduced to their family or you're introduced to their friends. When you have Venus in Cancer, there's a very good possibility that those family members or those friends are going to fall in love with you. Not romantically, but be like, oh, you're so wonderful. I'm so glad that so-and-so's going out with you. You're the perfect person for them to go out with or to date. You feel like family. You feel like, or if it's friends, you feel like one of us. You feel like part of the group, part of the friends. And this is a wonderful thing because if you're dating someone and someone's introducing you to their family and friends, you obviously want the family and friends to like you. And Venus in Cancer is wearing the proper perfume to win the accolades and the praise and the fondness of these people. But what can also happen to people with Venus in Cancer is that they can become such a hit with the family of the person that they're going out with, or they become such a hit with the friends of the person that they're going out with, that the person that they're going out with can sort of feel ignored or like, okay, you brought home this wonderful person, so we're not going to talk to you anymore. We're going to talk to this wonderful person that we're all enamored with. And sometimes, when they feel ignored, especially if it's around family members, it can maybe bring up feelings of being overlooked earlier in life, or maybe even sibling rivalry or something like that. And that's something that people born with Venus in Cancer want to watch out for. You might be a hit with the family or friends, but without knowing it, you might sort of be subtly stoking the resentment of the person you came in on the arm with. And so when you have Venus in Cancer, it's always a really good idea to focus a lot of attention on the person that you're dating to, be like, oh, it's wonderful to meet all of you, and then bring the attention back to the person by maybe praising their efforts or telling a wonderful story about how you got together, something that praises this person. So what happens when you get this squaring energy taking place? And remember, a square between two zodiac signs is a one-upmanship. It's a combative or competitive dynamic that's taking place. That's because each of the two signs that are squaring believes that its way is the right way. So on one hand, you can have this Saturn and Neptune and Aries energy, which might describe someone who's coming across as really tough and rugged, and someone who doesn't care about other people's feelings, when actually underneath they do, because there's that Saturn element of doubt and anxiety. And then you bring in this sort of Venus and Cancer energy. The Venus and Cancer energy is going to naturally pick up on the conflict that's going on in the Aries energy, okay? It's going to naturally pick up on it and be like, is this person like trying too hard? Or is this person like overcompensating? Or is this person like wound up really tight? And what can I do to get this person to relax, to open up and lead more with what they're really feeling rather than this sort of like putting on airs or putting on this pretense? Well, as you might imagine, that's the last thing that someone who's expressing Saturn and Neptune energy in Aries is going to want to feel. They're going to feel like they're being called on it. Like maybe this person senses that I'm not as tough as I say I am, that I'm not as rugged as I say that I am, that I'm not as heartless or powering through as I say that I am. And so they're not going to want to be around that person. They're not going to like that energy that's being expressed towards them. Whereas the Venus in Cancer might be like, oh, this is a troubled person, or maybe this person had a difficult childhood, or maybe this person feels lonely and weak, and so they have to put on these airs, and I'm going to reach out to this person and try to get this person to talk about it. You could sort of see where that's going, and not a good place. Okay, and so what might happen is that the person who's expressing that Saturn and Neptune energy in Aries is going to double down on it. They're going to double down on being more defensive or more angry or loud, or I don't need your sympathy, or I don't need your care. I don't need, to be mommied, or, something like that. And so the Venus and Cancer energy might be like, like that really hurt. That was a really mean thing to say. And so why are you being so difficult? And so in turn, what might happen is that the Venus and Cancer energy might, feel pain, exhibit a pained expression, which of course will only make the Aries more angry and more, like get rid of that pained expression, and because they're being made to feel guilty. And so the Venus and Cancer withdraws into themselves, but they're still kind of like wounded and wondering like, that person must be hurting a lot underneath that they're acting like this. And as I said, you can see where the squaring is going on. There's an entanglement. No one energy is talking to the other energy well at this time. And when planets are squaring, they don't afford for conversation. They don't afford for dialogue because they're too wound up in trying to get the better of the other person. The Aries energy is going to want to dominate, and the Cancer energy is going to want to bond and nurture, and feels that if I keep appealing to that side of the person, that they'll melt, or they'll soften up, or they'll, really start to express or feel who they really are underneath. So the best way to handle this squaring energy when it's taking place is really not to engage it openly. Okay, because if you're coming from the Venus and Cancer place and you want to soothe and get the other person to talk, they're not talking. So don't try. And if you're the Aries energy, which is feeling moved by someone caring about you, but you're convinced that you have to be tough and rugged, that's not the time for you to be in the same room as this other energy either. It's a good time for you to retreat and to try to figure out what's going on with you and whether you feel like expressing that or not. If a couple of days pass and you find that both parties are sort of like, hey, let's revisit what happened the other day, what was that all about? And if there's good humor and receptivity because the energy of the square has passed, then it's worth the conversation. And if there's truly a bond between the two of you, you will have a wonderful conversation, maybe in part defensive, maybe in part humorous, might be clumsy in some areas and relieving in others. But after the energy of a square is passed is the best time to sort of address a situation, not while you're in the full heat of that square because the issue is just not addressable. But what if after the energy of the square has passed, and that's usually, as I said, about maybe 2 to 3 days, if there isn't any sign of someone wanting to talk about it or trying to approach, then you're probably better off just moving on and keeping a safe distance from this type of energy, especially if it's something like a work situation. If it's a work situation, then as you can probably already tell, we're on ground that's not really the most professional and not really the most objective. So it's best not to get entangled in that sort of thing, to take a couple of days to sort of put on your professional cap and figure out a way to speak to another person, which is respectful and professional, but not personal. You want to avoid that. But let's say, you're dealing with someone in a relationship or a relationship possibility where things are going to be personal. You're going to have to do some heavy thinking about this. On the one hand, if the Aries, Saturn, Neptune energy sounded familiar to you, you're not going to want to feel like you have to walk on eggshells with someone who's going to show a hurt expression whenever, you say something that's maybe a little bit too forceful, and then if you're in the Venus and Cancer position, you don't want to have to do the other person's emotional homework. You haven't opted for the position of therapist or helping that person to understand themselves. And so again, that might be something in which you might decide for yourself, dating this person isn't worth it, or this association isn't really worth it. Squares have a tendency to bring up patterns, and they can bring up patterns in a very explicit way and in a very heated way. But just because the pattern shows up in that way doesn't make that the best time to talk about it. But if time has passed and there's really no sign on one side of the fence or the other side of the fence of reaching out to one another, then the square might have done its job, which is to tell you this might not be the best person to be in a relationship with or an association with. That, with your differences, you may not get to a place where you really get, understand, or trust one another in that sort of an intimate way. Signs most affected are Aries, Taurus, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. On August 6th, Mars enters the zodiac sign of Libra. You're the one who's going to have to find a way to play nicely with others, as long as Mars is traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra. That's because there's no such thing as going it alone when the planet of gumption and drive is passing through the realm of Venus. Cooperation and collaboration are the means to your ends. This means that you will have to learn when to yield the field, to find a place where conflicting needs dovetail, or to share the credit with those who don't really deserve it. Politesse is an ill-fitting suit for the red-tempered planet, but there's no denying that this passage through Libra will improve your manners and your appeal. Mars will be in the zodiac sign of Libra from August 6th until September 21st. Signs most affected are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Scorpio, and Capricorn. On August 8th, Mars will form an opposition to Saturn in the sky. Now there's a lot to unpack with this opposition going on between Mars and Saturn. First of all, we're dealing with two malefic planets, Mars and Saturn. Secondly, each is in either their detriment or their fall. Mars is in detriment in the zodiac sign of Libra, and Saturn is in fall in the zodiac sign of Aries. Finally, they're forming an opposition to one another. Okay, that means they want nothing to do with one another at all. Now, the reason why these two planets want nothing to do with one another, aside from the fact that they're in opposition to one another, is because neither planet is operating from a position of strength. So there's bound to be a lot of avoidance behavior that's going on because they don't want the other planet finding out that they're not operating from a position of strength. Let me think of an example. It's like, okay, It's like, for instance, when a boss resents needing an employee as much as they do. Okay, a boss wants to be in charge, they want to give direction, but let's say that they're dependent on an employee. Maybe the whole department is overly dependent on an employee, and that boss isn't comfortable with it. Because what if that employee leaves? What if that employee gets full of themselves? What if that employee starts making demands? And so, because they're aware that they rely so much on this employee, they might start to treat that employee icily. Okay, they might start to act as if they don't care, or they might even heap more and more demands on that employee. So much to the extent where the employee might begin to feel resentment for demands being loaded on top of them, but they might also resent the boss for not being recognized for the good that they do. Maybe this employee has a tendency to pull everyone's fat out of the fire or come up with the solution in the 11th hour, or is particularly creative or very ingenious. Maybe this employee wants the boss's approval or maybe even mentorship and really feels very dispirited when the boss treats them icily or holds them at a distance or doesn't recognize the good that they do. What happens here, because obviously neither side, the boss or the employee, is going to express or talk about what's going on because they're feeling too defensive because of the opposition, what happens here is a sort of vicious circle of resentment as the two keep their distance, but at the same time circle one another. And this is where the opposition can become detrimental. The silence or the distance that's kept between the two sends the wrong signals. The boss doesn't want the employee to know that they depend on them so much, so that they withhold the approval and the recognition, the very approval and recognition that the employee sorely needs because they want to really show themselves in a positive way to the boss. And then the more that the employee exhibits their talents and skills by their ingenuity or their creativity or coming up with the solution that saves the day in the 11th hour, the more that the boss is reminded of this employee's abilities and withholds. And so the employee wants to show all the good that they can do because they want to win the praise and the approval. And that only makes the boss withdraw out of fear that the employee will leave. So in the end, you can see how this opposition becomes both polarizing and detrimental. Yet when you take a closer view at the planetary dignities and rulerships at play, you'll see that it's the Mars in Libra energy that's the most powerful, because Mars in Libra rules Saturn in Aries. So what does that mean? What that means is that if you find yourself in that sort of Mars and Libra position where you're trying to win the approval or the recognition of someone in charge or someone who is withholding the appreciation or the fondness that you seek from you, what it means is that it's incumbent upon you, if you're in this Mars and Libra position, to show proper respect to the person who's holding back, while subtly taking over the reins. Okay, so in other words, stop looking to the other person, that sort of Saturn and Aries person, to take charge or take the lead, and actually take the lead yourself, but do it by always showing proper respect, always by maybe even saying to the person, this is a wonderful idea that you had, and all I'm doing is building on the idea that you presented. In this way, you can assure the person that you're not trying to take over or take the lead, that you actually value that person. Now, let's say you're the Saturn and Aries person in this scenario. You're the person who's in charge or sitting on the prerogative or holding back on a choice or a decision out of fear that if you're too invested in this person will leave. There's fear of rejection often is what is at the root of a lot of withdrawal whenever you're dealing with Saturn energy. If you find yourself in that sort of paralyzed place where you are withholding and withheld, then it's a good idea, if that other person is showing that they're going to take over the lead, it's a good idea to follow that person's lead, to say, that was a really good idea, or I really like the way that you're handling this situation, and then to thank them afterwards, after they get you through the impasse, to thank them, and maybe if you can manage it, praise them, because that's what they wanted all along. That's what they were looking for in the first place. So instead of sort of holding back your feelings or your affection because you're afraid of the other person leaving and thus creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, find it in your heart to show that you value this person, that you're following this person's lead, that this is a good thing. And then you will give this person reason to stay and to work even harder for you in the future. Signs most affected are Aries, Libra, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Aquarius. On August 9th, there will be a full moon in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. This is a good day to talk about the things that you feel are holding you back, especially with someone you trust, like a close friend, an older relative, or a mentor. The moon in Aquarius creates a safe space where you can examine yourself fairly and without judgment or criticism. There's a cool clarity to the moon in Aquarius, and it's this feeling of transparency that allows you a bird's eye view of your fears, anxieties, and insecurity. You get a sort of distance on yourself on these very intimate matters so that they're not so close, so intimidating, or so in your face. Talking through your problems and patterns can help you to kick the bad habits to the curb and to redirect the negative thinking that keeps leading you down the same old blind alleys. That's what makes this a very personally enlightening day. Signs most affected are Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Libra, and Aquarius. On August 10th, Mars in Libra forms a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. The rules of the game may have changed recently, but it's a whole new ballgame when the rules are on your side. Now, you may think that this gives you carte blanche to do what you please, but that's not exactly how air trines work. Air signs, that's Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, air signs rule over relationships and associations. So they're all about cooperating and coordinating with other people. In other words, you can expect to make a lot of headway when Mars trines Pluto, as long as you factor in what other people have to say and thank them for their input. Now, this doesn't mean you have to take everyone's advice or direction. In fact, it might be a better idea to ignore some people altogether, but it's a good idea to show others that you are listening. This makes people feel recognized and valued. Air energy is team effort energy. So whatever you can do to get people on board with what you want to do, the better. Not only will you have their support, but people can help you to accomplish more than you ever would have accomplished on your own. Signs most affected are Aries, Gemini, Libra, Scorpio, and Aquarius. On August 11th, Mercury comes out of retrograde. Mercury, out of retrograde, is good news for anyone who's been waiting to hear back on an offer, a bid, or a sale. You will finally receive that green light you've been praying for. However, terms may have changed without you knowing it, not unlike baggage in the overhead bins that might have shifted in flight. What this means is that you will want to make a point of double-checking certain details, because Mercury retrogrades are famous for introducing subtle changes in wording or added clauses, camouflaged and tediously technical-sounding jargon. You don't want to wind up agreeing to or signing on for something that was not part of the original deal, and that could wind up costing you in the end. Signs most affected are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Virgo, and Sagittarius. On August 12th, Venus forms a conjunction to Jupiter. It's always nice when the two benefics form a conjunction in the sky. Those two benefics are Venus and Jupiter. And Venus and Jupiter have a lot of history in mythology and astrology. Both symbolize love and love-making. Both are known for their extramarital affairs. And both are famous for bringing a little bit of heaven down to earth. But did you know that Venus is older than Jupiter? In Greek mythology, Venus springs to life when Uranus is castrated by his son Saturn. That makes Uranus Jupiter's grandfather, and that means that Venus is Jupiter's aunt. Of all the Olympians on Mount Olympus, Venus is neither Jupiter's sibling or child. She is his contemporary, and perhaps even superior, in that Venus can make Jupiter a slave to love, and she often does, but Jupiter cannot overrule her. Nevertheless, they enjoy each other's company, which is good news when they come together in the zodiac sign of Cancer, the zodiac sign of Jupiter's exaltation. This is a wonderful time for romance, obviously, but also fertility, because both planets are famous for sharing the love. This conjunction is wonderful for bringing people together under one roof, like with a gathering or a community. And it's also good for anything that has to do with real estate, property, or home ownership. In a business context, this conjunction between Venus and Jupiter is excellent for mergers and acquisitions. So, if you are looking to combine forces with another company, or if you are working for a company that's being acquired, then this conjunction is favorable to you, either because you will benefit from this merger, or you'll be protected by being one of those people that the powers that be decide to keep on after the two companies have come together. Signs most affected are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, and Pisces. On August 14th, Mercury forms a sextile to Mars. This is an excellent energy for negotiating, because you'll be able to organize facts and prioritize them in such a way as to make a compelling case. Moreover, you have a very strong sense of what the other party wants, which means that you can anticipate their every question, reservation, or request. Usually the Mars energy would push for what it wants. But when it forms a sextile to the much more playful Mercury, you'll be able to enter into a volley of sorts, where you bat ideas and figures back and forth until you come up with something that will make both sides happy. And that's what makes for the best negotiation of all. Signs most affected are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Virgo, and Libra. On August 16th, there will be a last quarter moon in the zodiac sign of Taurus. It will be hard to give back something that flourished under your charge. Maybe it's an animal that was put in your care, a problematic situation that you successfully turned around, or a property matter you were asked to manage temporarily. It's clear that you care about this more than the person who entrusted you with it, but at the end of the day, it's theirs and not yours. Last quarter moons are all about withdrawing energy that you once gave so freely, because this is when the moon is losing light as it heads towards the end of its lunar cycle. It's never easy leaving a situation like this, but trust that everyone will remember the good that you did. Signs most affected are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Capricorn, and Pisces. On August 22nd, the Sun enters Virgo. This is the first time in 2 years that the Sun will enter the zodiac sign of Virgo without Saturn opposing it. Translation: this will be the first time in 2 years that the Virgo energy in your horoscope won't be dampened or compromised. It's like going from a 1-bar signal on your smartphone to a 5-bar one. Virgo is the time of year when we reap the harvest of our labors. We see this around the country in the annual state fairs, where people show off their best cattle, prize-winning fruits and vegetables, homemade crafts, and baked goods. Virgo season is when we see if we're taking in a bumper crop or slim pickings. Life, since 2023, when Saturn first entered the zodiac sign of Pisces, may have been hard on your health and wealth, the two things that Virgo, being an earth sign, rules over. You might have seen the end of some things that were of value to you. Now, this wouldn't have been a catastrophic end, like a disaster out of left field, but more along the lines of an expiration date, meaning that a relationship, or a job, or a life situation had reached the end of its lifespan. Now, you may not have a lot to show for yourself on the other side of all this, but you will, as long as you keep your eyes on the prize and choose to live the life you like, rather than settle for liking the life you live. Signs most affected are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, and Capricorn. On August 23rd, there will be a new moon in Virgo. New moons are often good times for setting an intention. This may be something that you want to achieve in the month ahead, or it may be something you want to retrieve or reconnect with. Now, this month may be a bit challenging because Uranus is forming a square to this new moon energy, which means that you may be feeling stress about what comes next or anxiety about what you're leaving behind. We are often told that stress is toxic to the body, and it can be. But we also have to remember that stress is a part of life, and that the body is more resilient than we think. Virgo isn't a sign that's going to shut out stress. Rather, it's a zodiac sign that's going to manage it. The best way to work with the stressful situations in your life right now is to be open to new ideas, to look for options and alternatives. Do this, and you'll find that things aren't as overwhelming as they might present themselves to be at first. Another thing to do during this time is to focus on a practice. That could be working out, swimming, or Tai Chi, but it could also be playing a musical instrument, cooking, needlepoint, or beating your previous time on the Rubik's Cube. Rituals are ruled by the moon, and that's because rituals center us in ourselves and create a continuity that connects the past to the present and the future. Make this your new moon intention, and you'll create for yourself, within yourself, a safe haven that can withstand the pressures of the world. Signs most affected are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, and Capricorn. On August 24th, the Sun in Virgo will form a square to Uranus in Gemini. This is a make or break time for you. You've had your fill of power struggles and don't want to feel beholden to anyone anymore. But are you ready to break out on your own and go it alone? That's the question you'll be asking when the Sun squares Uranus, planet of revolution and change. This is when the game board that you've been studying closely and minutely will be knocked over and all the pieces will be sent flying. Now, whether you leave those pieces where they are and decide to move on or try to gather them all up again is your call. Just remember that those who do not learn from history are condemned to repeat it. Signs most affected are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. On August 25th, Venus enters the astrological sign of Leo. Venus in Leo is what I like to describe as a golden Venus. She's infinitely attractive here in the zodiac sign of Leo. And when you have a golden Venus, a Venus in Leo, you may find that you attract the attention of people who may be a few rungs higher up on the ladder of success than you are. These people may see something in you that you may not see yourself. Maybe it's a talent, Maybe it's an ability. Maybe it's a beauty that you would have if maybe you cut your hair or slightly altered your appearance. They see in you a potential, and it's a potential that they are going to want to help you to develop. Now, this is tremendously encouraging because we don't always recognize our own potential. We might feel like, oh, maybe we have a talent to do this, or maybe we're kind of skilled at that. But sometimes what it takes is someone seeing that in ourselves. Sometimes what it takes is someone naming that in ourselves and offering to help us develop that. Now, that's wonderful, as I said. I mean, we don't always understand how much that we are capable of. That's why we will turn to a teacher, or coach, or a mentor to help us develop our own abilities. But this same situation, especially when you're dealing with Venus and Leo, can also get a bit dodgy. What if someone sees in you something that they think is important, and they're going to want to help you to achieve this? But what if after a while you feel like you don't think it's important to you, or you don't really want to develop it as much, or you see other things that you might be interested in? Well, this person who's helping you develop this potential, who sees something in you that has a special sort of quality, isn't going to so easily give up on what they have projected onto you. And that's where Venus in Leo can get a little bit problematic. Now, as soon as Venus enters the zodiac sign of Leo, it forms a trine to Saturn and Neptune in the zodiac sign of Aries. Now, a trine energy is a benevolent energy. It's an energy that exists between two signs, two totally different signs, but two signs that share the same element. Aries, for instance, is a fire sign, just like Leo is a fire sign. So Venus here is going to make you more fiery. It's going to make you more luminescent. It's going to make you more charismatic and magnetic. And what also happens here, especially with the combination of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, is that this mentor or superior or teaching figure is going to see in you this potential. They're going to be very gung-ho about developing it. They're going to be very earnest and committed to helping you make something of yourself. And you're going to find that idea very exciting, very enthusiastic. And that's because it's a fiery energy. You'll be like, oh, wow, they see something special in me, and I want to live up to that. Okay, so that's going to be your first feeling as these planets form a trine to one another. This will be followed on August 28th by a sextile to Uranus in the zodiac sign of Gemini. Venus in Leo will form a sextile to Uranus in the zodiac sign of Gemini. This combines one sign which is fire with another sign which is air, and it increases the excitability. It accelerates the pace, just like a wind will spread a fire in all directions when it's blowing mightily. All right, so not only are you getting together with this energy, and there's this feeling that you could really become something one day, and that you're attractive and very magnetic and very charismatic, but the process gets accelerated. Could very well be, it's like one of those Hollywood studio legends where they discover a famous star at a soda fountain and take them to meet the casting coach who says they have to meet the producer right away. And they meet with the producer who's like, this is the best thing since Greta Garbo. And so they now have to meet with the director, and they sign that person right away on the spot. What Uranus in Gemini is going to do is accelerate a process and also bring in opportunities, one lickety-split right after the other. So that when we get to Venus opposing Pluto on August 27th, this could begin to create a dilemma, or what we call a situation for you. So in other words, people might be very enthusiastic about making a connection with you. They want to help you to develop yourself. You want to be developed. They see you going places. You see yourself going places. But what you might not really pick up on is the signal that you're making somebody else jealous. Okay, Venus is the planet that rules over attraction and the laws of attraction, but Venus also rules over things like envy and jealousy. And as people become more excited about you, that might make you the object of other people's derision envy, or jealousy. Obviously, not all of this is going to come out in 3 days like that, but what I'm trying to describe here is a planetary energy that's setting you up for a situation in the future, and to be wary of that, to pretty much be wary of two things. The first is don't make any promises right away in which you are committing yourself to someone lock, stock, and barrel. There's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of excitement that's going on with all of this fiery energy coursing through your horoscope that's affecting the planet Venus in Leo. And you're going to want to say yes, because Venus likes to be liked, okay? And let yourself be a bit non-committal. Let yourself say, oh, that's wonderful. What a great idea. Let's keep talking about this. Let's keep the conversation going. Let yourself stay non-committal so that you can keep your options and alternatives open. Venus in Leo is a fixed sign, and it's a fire sign, so it's going to want to sign on the line that's dotted right off the bat. So let yourself keep your options open as you accelerate or feel yourself gaining more and more charismatic and magnetic energy here. Also keep in mind that you may not be committed to going the full course of what's being talked about. So let yourself play with the idea, let yourself enjoy this time in the sun, but keep in mind that you don't really know what the rules of the game are at this point, and you're going to want to keep that part to yourself. The way of keeping that to yourself is by leaving things open-ended, by not committing right away. Another thing to keep in mind is that you might be becoming the object of someone else's jealousy or envy. So be careful of saying things like, oh yes, I am beautiful, isn't that great? And risking the ire of somebody else. Because where you're experiencing this situation in a very new and wonderful way, the person who's envious and jealous has been around this situation for a while, and they could make a lot of trouble for you if you are not careful. Signs most affected are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Scorpio, and Aquarius. On August 28th, Uranus forms a sextile to Neptune. You're on fire when Uranus in Gemini forms a sextile to Neptune in Aries, and you have to go after things full throttle. Now let me take a moment here to sort of break down what's going on. First of all, we're dealing with a very rare event. It's very rare when two modern planets form a sextile to one another in the sky. Uranus will be in the zodiac sign of Gemini, and Neptune will be in the zodiac sign of Aries. Now, when modern planets form a sextile like this, or any other sort of planetary relationship, it's not so much about an event that manifests as it is the current that is carrying the events that are manifesting. So let's break it down here for just a quick moment. Neptune in Aries is about vision, okay? Something that uplifts or something that influences. As we said earlier in today's video, Neptune glamorizes whatever zodiac sign it happens to be passing through. And when Neptune is in the zodiac sign of Aries, it's going to glamorize all those attributes that are connected to Aries. Aries, as we know, is named after the god of war, so that might be something that it glamorizes, but it can also glamorize that sort of fierce, rugged individualism that's so much a part of the American mythology of the cowboy. Neptune, as I said before earlier in this video, glamorizes whatever zodiac sign it happens to be traveling through. And right now, Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries, which gives one moment for pause because Aries is ruled by Mars, named after the Roman god of war. So Neptune could be glamorizing war, for instance, or any sort of act of violence. These would all be quite natural to the way that Mars energy works. But Neptune, in glamorizing the Aries archetype, for lack of a better way of putting it, is also glamorizing the American myth of the lone cowboy. The lone cowboy who strides into town and people look at the lone cowboy suspiciously. He's a rugged individual. No one knows where he came from. He's a drifter. And there's something that's very tough and unrelenting about him. And and maybe this lone cowboy strides into town and locks eyes with another cowboy who's like, who are you, stranger? And they vow to, I don't know, fight a duel at high noon or something along those lines. So there can be this kind of like energy to Aries that comes out when Neptune is traveling through the sign. There's this feeling of a rugged individualism. But that doesn't mean we're all going to be sitting ringside at some sort of boxing match or gladiator battle or something along those lines. Aries also uplifts the individual. It shows what an individual person can do. It can even make that person heroic. So what can happen during this period of time is that you may feel something very heroic about yourself, or you do something very heroic, and it's something that catches on with people. It's something that gains a lot of notice. And this is in keeping with Neptune in Aries, because Neptune in Aries uplifts. Neptune in Aries even influences. Now, when it sextiles Uranus in Gemini, this is basically the means by which this vision is going to be dispersed. Now, when you remember that Uranus rules over modern technology, it kind of puts me in mind of an influencer, okay? This could be a person, a brand, or an ideology. Something that people want to sign on for because it gets them excited, like I don't know, a rock concert. This would be my way of describing this Neptune in Aries energy with a Gemini Uranus energy. It's people coming together and sort of celebrating something, and it's getting transmitted to all of these other people and getting them excited and enthusiastic. It's kind of like what's been often described as an infectious enthusiasm. There's a sort of infectious enthusiasm when Uranus and Neptune form a sextile between the zodiac signs of Gemini and Aries. So with all of this energy that's coursing through your horoscope, this is a time when you want to take as much ground as you possibly can. Maybe you've, I don't know, released a one-off video of yourself playing a guitar and singing a song that you composed, and you discover that it's suddenly gone viral. Maybe you run a small business that during this period of time suddenly becomes quite popular, and there's all sorts of talks about wanting to expand. People are approaching you with, what do you think about expanding on the business that you're doing? And I want to fund it or back it. So it's this, what can start out as a very humble idea that sort of takes on great scope during this period of time that Uranus and Neptune are sextiling one another. So with this rush of energy, this rush of fire energy, this rush of air energy, this building excitement and enthusiasm, the question you need to ask yourself during this time is, can you sustain your progress? It's a tough question. It's a sobering question that many overnight sensations and one-hit wonders have had to face. Can I keep up with demand? So whether it's orders pouring in or the "feed me, Seymour" hunger of the algorithm, Uranus sextile Neptune is like a fire that needs to be fueled. And if you are going to reap this wild wind that's coursing through your horoscope, then you need to not only keep up, but also how to manage it. Signs most affected are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. On August 24th, there will be a first quarter moon in Sagittarius. This isn't the time to be humble or self-sacrificing. Not when there's a first quarter moon in the zodiac sign of Sagittarius. A first quarter moon is a waxing moon, which means that it's increasing in light. So you need to be perfectly clear about your feelings. Now, it isn't easy exposing yourself to rejection, but never trying when you had the chance to is even worse. Now, will there be a happily ever after ending? It's hard to tell, given the current alignment of planets, but this is one of those times when you have to make your own luck. Sagittarius is a sign that's famous for holding fast to its beliefs in the face of daunting circumstances. and its absolute faith in Hail Mary passes, last-minute turnarounds, and unlikely rescues has gotten many a brave soul through some pretty rough passages. Signs most affected are Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.